I'm going to share an organism with you guys today and a kind of interesting evolutionary story of a type that I hadn't heard before. So let's get right into it.
The banana slug?
Not quite. It's the Joshua tree, which the Joshua tree is from the yucca family. A lot of yuccas are a little more, they're almost like, look like a grass or something like that. But this is a yucca tree that's evolved this kind of tree-like growth habit. And a kind of interesting fact about Joshua trees and their branching, they don't look like they branch like a normal tree, and of course they don't. And I learned that Joshua tree branching is caused by one of two things. A young Joshua tree has a flower that's at the terminal bud, and after that flower matures, the growth branches because the meristem, which is where the plant kind of grows from, has been turned into this reproductive organ. So there's that reason, and there's also this insect called the yucca weevil that sometimes eats the meristem of the Joshua tree, and it can't keep growing in that direction then, so it branches. So that's why you'll see these kind of very irregular and varied growth habits of Joshua trees. Every Joshua tree looks almost drastically different from most of the Joshua trees around them. They all branch in very different ways. And also a Joshua tree, of course, being a yucca, the yuccas are not trees. They look like this. It's not a true tree. It doesn't have wood as we know wood. It's full of kind of a fibrous material, and the trunk is held up by like dead leaf bases and stuff like that, which is also true of things like palm trees. So we'll take a look at the distribution map of Joshua trees here. And you can see it's pretty spotty. A lot of plants that are less rare, more widely distributed, have a much, or even less widely distributed than this, but have better seed distribution, will have a much more uniform or kind of coherent range. And the range of the Joshua tree is really spotty, and that has to do with seed dispersal. So you see here the fruits of this normal yucca are a lot smaller than the fruits that you see on a Joshua tree, which are these big, rigid pods. And the fruits of a yucca are usually eaten by things like birds or fruit-eating bats if they're in a part of the world that has fruit-eating bats. And that's how their seeds are distributed. But these, they're high up off the ground. Sometimes low-to-the-ground fruits are eaten by things like mule deer and stuff like that, but Joshua trees don't have very many low-to-the-ground fruits. So what's going on here with these fruits? It's actually a case of evolutionary anachronism, which is when two species co-evolve and then one of those species goes extinct. So in the case of the Joshua tree, we're talking about ground sloths, megafauna, old megafauna of North America. They were tall enough to reach these fruits at the tops of Joshua trees. Fossils in caves in this part of the US have, of these sloths, this is called the Shasta ground sloth, have been found to have scat in them that have both Joshua tree leaves and seeds in them. And it's believed that they were the main seed distributor of Joshua trees. And this is of conservation importance too, because Joshua trees inhabit a really exact elevation or a pretty narrow elevation range of these deserts in the West. And they can be, and their seeds can be distributed by water downwards, but they kind of are at their downwards limit now. And these deserts are warming. So the Joshua tree's range that it can live is moving upwards, and they don't have any way of moving upwards without these ground sloths to kind of carry their seeds back up in elevation. And another example of evolutionary anachronism that you guys may not know about is the avocado. Excuse this bad open source picture of an avocado here. But avocados as well have something weird going on with their seeds. It's a fleshy fruit, which usually indicates it's a fleshy, nutritious fruit, which usually indicates that the fruit's purpose is seed dispersal, but it's got a huge fruit in it. Most things that eat an avocado will not ingest the fruit. They'll just leave it behind at the base of the tree or wherever they found it. So avocados are another case in North America of evolutionary anachronism, specifically with ground sloths, and also with these other organisms that are called gomphotheres, which are kind of elephant-like animals, and perhaps mammoths as well, although I don't really know how much their range is overlapped historically. So that's another example of evolutionary anachronism, except the avocado found another species to spread its seed, which is humans. We like to eat this fruit, and we spread its seed through agriculture. So yeah, the Joshua tree, of course, co-evolved with this ground sloth to become one of the centers of the ecosystem in which it exists, the Mojave Desert. Lots of species depend on the Joshua tree. The yucca weevil, as we were talking about, it's a very big food source. Scott's oriole nests in the yucca tree. The yucca moth, if you want to read about, is another interesting case. It's a moth that pollinates the Joshua tree flowers, and it's actually the only organism that does so, because Joshua tree flowers don't produce nectar. They just provide shelter for the yucca moth's eggs, which is a really crazy pollination scheme. Of course, termites, ants, that kind of thing that feed on wood detritus really benefit from Joshua trees in this ecosystem. And so there's a big web of organisms that depend on this one organism. And the one organism that the Joshua tree depends on is gone. So that was just a really interesting, to me, kind of evolutionary story of a type I don't usually see. I don't usually walk around, especially in the forest around here, and see a plant with such an interesting and stark difference in its natural history from the past, when it had this one seed distributor that was very, very productive, to the present, where it really has nothing besides water to distribute its seeds. And of course, it's in the desert, so there's not a lot of that either. So I just wanted to give a quick plug to this cool blog that drew my interest in this. I was just Googling Joshua trees, kind of trying to figure out about their natural history and stuff. And they have a lot of cool facts, both about this evolutionary anachronism, and this is where I found the graphic here, and as well as the yucca moth and its pretty interesting life cycle. So yeah, really interesting evolutionary story with the Joshua tree, and that's that.